I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe and the dramatic retrial of his girlfriend Karen Reed. It's a retrial unlike most because it's getting even more attention than the first trial. Here's the story. Karen Reed faces charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of a fatal accident in connection with the 2022 death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors allege she struck him with her SUV after a night of drinking and left him in the snow to die. But Reed has maintained her innocence, claiming she's being framed to protect others, specifically individuals present at the Canton home where O'Keefe was last seen alive. Her arrest sparked a firestorm of public support. The Free Karen Reed movement has exploded both at the courthouse and across social media. Outside Norfolk Superior Court, supporters gathered daily, waving signs, live streaming the proceedings, and demanding transparency and accountability. Online, hashtags trend, TikTok theories circulate, and a digital army of followers scrutinize every development. For many, this case has become a symbol of fighting institutional corruption, and Reed a figure of resistance against a justice system they no longer trust. So there are a lot of reasons why this trial and retrial have been so different, but obviously the first thing that really caught my attention after the initial headlines about what happened to John O'Keefe was the public reaction. And we see it locally when you go up to the courthouse, and you will see many members of the Free Karen Reed movement who show up, like physically show up at the courthouse to show their support. There were many of them in the first trial, and they are there again in the second trial, despite the changing of the rules of where they can and can't be. The thing about this retrial is that the retrial has taken off in another place as well, on social media. Second time around, many more people are paying attention to this case, and many more people are talking about this case, and there's a definite theme when you start taking a look at what people are posting. Take a look at a sample.
Okay, so I'm watching the Karen Reed trial, and I am just absolutely floored. The defense team is doing an amazing job by pointing out how Brennan has lied during his questioning, brought in information that shouldn't have been brought in.
Day 30 in the Karen Reed trial, and today was amazing. I'll call her Dr. L on the stand, and she's so calm, so eloquent, so everything. She's just answering everything, and like literally like looking at Hank Brennan like, nah.
This trial is such a sham because what do you mean you've had 3 years, a grand jury hearing, an entire trial, and now half of a retrial? And you're telling me you still haven't locked down a time of death?
When this case is done, Alan Jackson and Alessia are going to jump Hank Brennan in the parking lot. Yo, they in court beefing. This case needs to be thrown out.
There's no way on earth that you're going to tell me or convince me, if I were a juror, that the cops in the house did not know what was going on in their front lawn.
Okay, it's kind of like what happened in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. Things took off on social media, and what you were hearing on social media, there were certain themes, and you could tell what side everyone was on, which brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight. Why does the public overwhelmingly believe Karen Reed is not guilty? All right, scroll, you'll see. Yeah, there's some people on the other side, but it's not even close to the number of people who believe Karen Reed is not guilty. Why is that? Here to help answer that question, John DePietro, host and creator of Road Patrol Live, and Karen Reed supporter Kim Whalen. She's also known as Nurse Kim on TikTok and on YouTube. Great to have you both here.
Thanks, Penny.
Let me put something else up, because I'm not just grabbing this out of the air, okay? A Court TV Karen Reed poll. You ready? Guilty 13%, not guilty 76%. It's overwhelming, right? Another 5% believe lesser of manslaughter. That was posted 2 days ago. I've done my own poll on my channel. Take a look at these results. Guilty of striking John O'Keefe with her car, 14%. Not guilty because prosecutors did not prove their case, 21%. Factually innocent and wrongfully accused, 64%. Like, it's between 80 and 90% of the people in the public who are voicing their opinions overwhelmingly believe she's not guilty. Nurse Kim, I'll begin with you because I believe you're one of those 80 to 90%ers. Tell me why. Why do you think the public reaction has been this way?
Absolutely, Vinny. It was great to see everyone from TikTok, since that's where I started last trial for the first trial of Karen Read in the summer of 2024. And since then, we have had 2 full trials now, and the Commonwealth, in my opinion, has not proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Officer John O'Keefe was ever even struck by a vehicle. There are more questions in this case, Vinny, that really bring you back to the prosecution, to the Norfolk DA's office, Canton Police, and Mass State Police. What are we doing here? What have the taxpayers of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had to just fork out hundreds of thousands of dollars? And at the end of the day, we had Hank Brennan ask Dr. Andrew Rentschler, you know, how could this have occurred if Welcher, their own expert, did not provide any accident reconstruction? We're here. We're at a loss for words.
But let me ask you,
and
Kim.
Karen Read is factually innocent.
I just want to follow up with you, Kim. And I want to pull back just a little further from, I get the evidence, right? Mm-hmm. Is there something else at play here? Now, locally, when I meet all those folks outside the courthouse, many of them, if not all of them, are turtle riders. They're followers of Aidan Carney, Turtle Boy, and I know he has spoken a lot about this, right, through the years, has posted a lot and has had a lot of influence on those folks. But here in the retrial, it is coast to coast and around the world where this response is coming from. Do you think there's anything else at play here other than, you know, specific pieces of evidence and testimony in the trial?
Well, yeah, Vinny, because injustice anywhere threatens justice everywhere. And Karen could be any one of us. She could be you, she could be your sister, your daughter, or your mother. And we do not want to continue to see, when our eyes are opened to something as egregious as this. In my opinion, that's why people stand up and stand out literally for Karen Read.
Okay, John DePietro. I've never, like Johnny Depp, I understood. He's an A-lister. He's a mega star with the mega pint. I understood that. And then things escalated once they started to see and hear the testimony, okay? I understood that. What's your take on what's happening here? Because overwhelmingly, 80 to 90% of the public that is voicing their opinions on this are saying Karen Read is not guilty.
Vinny, first of all, look at the defendant. Very few women are on trial for murder in New England. Very few Caucasian women. This is in the inner city. She didn't use a gun or a knife. She used a luxury vehicle, a Lexus SUV. But what I have found, and I've been on this case since July 23, almost 2 years, what it comes down to is social media and how people learn about it on social media is in fact the conspiracy involved in the case. When people follow a conspiracy, and as a member of the media talk host, there's been other conspiracies. There was Sandy Hook. There was, 9/11 was an inside job. When people fall into...
But 90% of the public doesn't believe 9/11 was a hoax. 90% of the people don't believe Sandy Hook was a hoax. But here, 80 to 90% of the people believe Karen Read is not guilty.
It's how they find out about it on social media, and our habits have changed. For those that want to follow, there's plenty of outlets they can go to, and they only follow that news. And when we did the live shows, you heard those people get up and they talk about butt dials, and they talk about dog bites, and there's all the common things that they recite. when people chase a conspiracy, they stop looking at anything that stops the conspiracy. It's social media that is driving this. It hooks people in. They think there's something to this. And then there's plenty of outlets. This is not a mainstream media story initially. It was social media. Social media, you're asking the question, why do so many people? It's because of social media and people that get engaged with the conspiracy.
Kim, I'd like your reaction to that because you're one of the influencers on social media. Are you creating the influence?
She is.
Well, I think that I have used my voice and I have been as 100% honest with my best friends from out of town that I talk to about this in every live stream that I have. I go over what we've done in court, what the testimony was, and that is it, Vinny. The facts are the facts, and the lack of facts are the astounding part in this case.
And let me ask you this.
Vinny,
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, when the walls fall, they don't mention it. And listen, I respect Nurse Kim. There's a lot of nice people on that side. But do they acknowledge that the Google search didn't happen at 227? That's not even being challenged by the defense. They just move on. Remember, this was supposedly in the basement. Now they have in the garage. There was blood on the doorknob. Karen's, she's got the carpeting from the basement. There was someone named that was, Brian Albert confessed to. One thing about the conspiracy crowd, when things fall, no one thinks like, gee, maybe it didn't happen that way. They just move on to the next thing. I think the 227 that Dr. Richard Green's not testifying, that should be major because that was really the cornerstone of this whole thing.
The other thing, though, that I find interesting in all of this is that our camera is in there, right? So people can see and hear the testimony themselves. They can watch the trial, and they're also responding to that. And that's, to me, it's quite unique. Celebrity, I understand. This one, I'm trying to understand, and I think we're getting an understanding. I think you both made really good points about how people got there. The question now is the jury in the courtroom seeing the same trial that all the folks are seeing on social media and here on Court TV? We'll find out soon in this case. Coming up next, what do Karen Read's angry voicemails prove?
Third message, what time is that received?
12:59.
John, I'm telling you, kid, and nobody knows what the you want.
Lori Daybell, doomsday cult mom, convicted killer, and now defendant in yet another high-profile trial.
She didn't really care who she hurt.
This time for the attempted murder of a former family member.
Just makes you sad.
And again, she's representing herself.
What about the same problem?
Are you done? Or are you just going to keep...
Will this be the final chapter in the saga
of the doomsday cult mom?
The Lori Daybell Conspiracy Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Future.
Now, as far as this first voicemail, what time did this occur?
12:37 a.m.
And with the court's permission, if I could play that for the jury.
Yes.
Third message, what time is that received?
12:59.
John, I'm telling you, kid, and nobody knows what the you want.
With regard to the fifth message, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:11 a.m.
Yes, 1 in the morning, I'm with his niece and nephew. You her.
Those are voicemails left by Karen Read after she allegedly murdered John O'Keefe. That's what prosecutors are saying. She murders John O'Keefe and then leaves these voicemails. They were really a big part of the case in the first trial. And here in the second trial, they're part of the evidence in the case. But I don't know if they're going to be as big a piece for prosecutors. Let's take a listen to a couple more of these voicemails. Again, these are voicemails after prosecutors say Karen Read strikes John O'Keefe with her SUV.
And the sixth message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:18 a.m.
John, I'm going home. I cannot leave you sitting me. I need to go home. You are using me right now. Another girl keeps sleeping next to me. You're a loser.
The seventh message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
5:23 a.m.
Okay. Again, these are after the alleged murder, which makes them a little different than classic messages and interactions between a victim and someone accused of murder. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What do Karen Reed's angry voicemails prove? Again, keeping them in context. She's leaving them after the alleged murder. So what do they prove here? Still with us to help with our investigation, John DePietro and Karen Reed supporter Kim Whalen. All right, hey, John, from your perspective, what do these angry voicemails prove?
Vinny, I was in court when they played that. It was very loud. I was very awkward also with the jury. But, you know, with the case that the Commonwealth has put forward, which is she went forward, went back, what would someone sound like that did something like that? In those voicemails, I think it's very telling. You hear anger, you hear hatred, you hear alcohol-fueled rage. She did an interview where she said she was just upset because she's supposed to go in the house and then come out. That doesn't sound like someone that says, hey, what happened? I decided to go home. It was, it changed the tone in the courtroom. And they also did it, by the way, these were mixed in with all that she called him 53 times, all these calls that she didn't leave a voicemail, but she was calling him. But to me, you really heard a state of mind. You heard just how angry that she could get, how angry she was. I find that with the evidence, it's insight to just how angry she was that night.
Okay, Kim, what do you think these angry voicemails prove?
Yeah, Vinny, for me, it's completely different, as one would assume, than John DePietro's idea of what these voicemails meant. I think that many people can relate to being very angry at their significant other. And especially if you're listening to the words of Karen Reed. She's saying things like, you're a pervert. I think you're cheating on me. I'm going home. You're using me. Now, Vinny, does that make sense of a woman who allegedly just struck her innocent boyfriend on purpose, as alleged by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and left him to die on a front lawn? But yet you're calling him, as John mentions, 53 times and leaving him several very angry messages and asking and looking, in my opinion, for a response. One would not get a response if somebody is incapacitated on a lawn.
John, this also goes to, I think, goes to the relationship, right? To some respect. And this is usually in a case where a spouse is accused of murdering another spouse, or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. That becomes a big part of the trial, is what's going on in the relationship. Do you think this jury got a clear picture of John and Karen's relationship?
Well, I think they led up to, the day of, and they were kind of fighting that day. It also came on the heels of her flirting with Higgins. She told someone at the hospital that they had been fighting. But Vinny, to what Kim said, see, as someone that has studied this now for 2 years, and what was so interesting with both doctors, by the way, Lapazada and also Dr. Wolf, is the body just doesn't lie flat. When the body is struck, you could be a seizure, arms, legs moving. She has that quote where she says he didn't look mortally wounded. So what do I think? I think she thought she didn't hit him, but I think with the alcohol, she thought she hit him, but then when she looked, he was kind of moving a little bit. I don't think Karen Reed recognized or realized in her state just how hard his head hit the ground. So I think she thought he got up, went into the house, and then she's just venting to him. And she thought maybe there was another female he was interested in there. I don't think at that time she thought he's lying there, knocked out, unconscious, brain damaged.
Kim, what does the jury understand this relationship? Did they get it? Did they get a complete picture of what was going on between the victim and the alleged killer?
Yeah, Vinny, I do believe that the jury has gotten a full picture of Karen and John's relationship. They had about 2 years of their relationship that started in the beginning of the pandemic. Karen came in as kind of a bonus, extra fun parental figure after Officer John O'Keefe has had to be a disciplinarian and be the rules and keep the kids in line. And we know that on January 28th, 2022, that the argument that they got into was over Dunkin' Donuts. And that is very relatable to me, and I think to many people. And I hope that the jury understands that yes, people do have arguments, and that doesn't equate to a girlfriend deciding to reverse her vehicle and intentionally or knowingly strike her loved one and leave them to die.
Vinny, I think we're going to hear them in closing arguments, and I think she has an anger issue. She snapped at Joe Krowski's dad today in court. I don't know if you saw that clip, Vinny.
I did not see that clip. I know nothing about it. I can neither verify it nor...
It's online. It's online.
Okay. We'll take a look. You know, I'm online all day looking at you guys and everything else that's happening out there. Thank you both so much. John DePietro, Road Patrol Live. Kim Whalen, Nurse Kim on TikTok and YouTube. We'll see you soon. Up next, where is the evidence of the defense theory? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors are trying to convict his girlfriend Karen Reed for murder, but the defense has their own theory about what happened. Here's the story. Karen Reed stands accused of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence and leaving the scene of a fatal accident in the 2022 death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors claim that after a night of heavy drinking and arguing, Karen Reed backed her Lexus SUV into John O'Keefe outside of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, then drove away, leaving him to die in a blizzard. But the defense presents a drastically different narrative. They argue that O'Keefe was fatally beaten inside the home, owned by a fellow Boston police officer, Brian Albert, during a gathering that Reed never entered. According to their theory, O'Keefe was then placed outside to stage a hit and run, while investigators quickly turned their sights on Reed to protect their own. Expert witnesses for the defense challenge the SUV impact theory and suggest that John O'Keefe's injuries are more consistent with an assault and even a possible dog attack. The trial now centers on this explosive question: accident or orchestrated cover-up? From the beginning, we've been talking about the competing narratives in this case, the competing theories about what happened to John O'Keefe, how he ended up dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview in Canton, Massachusetts. So what I want to play for you right now is Alan Jackson, Karen Reed's attorney, in his opening statement. We picked out some pieces of his opening statement relative to this theory and what they believe is important and what will lead to the truth about what happened to John O'Keefe on that night. Let's take a listen.
The evidence will show that these injuries are from an animal, like a large dog, like the large dog that was inside the Albert house that night. You'll learn that Brian Albert has actually admitted that his large dog, the family dog, is, quote, not good with strangers. He's been disgraced by his own agency, not by us, by the Massachusetts State Police. Investigated, suspended, and fired. Conduct that included bias in favor of his friends, the all-powerful Albert family, and bias against my client, Miss Reed, the outsider. Shortly after this incident, Brian Albert got rid of his house, the whole thing. Just sold it. His childhood home, a home that had been in the Albert family for generations. He literally sold it mere months after this incident. Dog rehomed, phones destroyed, house sold. You'll learn that Higgins had romantic designs for Karen. You'll see a video at the waterfall of an unsettling interaction, troubling interaction between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe.
So before the trial started, the judge on this third-party theory would allow the defense to point the finger if they developed the evidence during the course of the trial. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Where is the evidence of the defense theory? A lot less witnesses testified this time, a lot less called by the prosecution, people that were in the house, around the house. The lead investigator never showed up. So where is the evidence of the defense theory? Here to help answer this question, longtime Massachusetts attorney Rick Grundy and journalist Rebecca Lavoie. She's also the host of Crime Writers On podcast. Thank you both for being here. A lot of people are talking about this now that the defense case is over. Where is the evidence of the defense theory? I'll start with you, Rebecca. From what you've seen and heard during the course of this retrial, not the original trial, but the retrial, where is the evidence of the defense theory?
You just made a really good point when you mentioned the first trial versus the second. People like me watched the first trial, and of course, we're looking for echoes of that story. But the bottom line is, and you know this as a former prosecutor, the defense has to prove nothing specific about their case. And as to the little clips you played from the opening statement, echoes of that came in throughout the trial. I mean, I would love personally to hear from Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, but this isn't about me. Like, we want an answer to this potential whodunit, right? But the other thing to remember is that if the defense has a theory of the case, they don't have to prove it. All they have to prove, as Dr. Rentschler said today, not to put the cart before the horse, is that there was not a collision, because that's what she's being accused of. The state has to come up with a specific theory and show evidence. The defense does not, but they certainly, I think, planted a little bit of seeds there.
And we've seen some things. Rick, I want to play a little testimony from Jennifer McCabe talking about Chloe the dog.
But you weren't saying it in that voice either. You were saying, Brian, Nicole, get up.
I'm not sure if it was that loud, but I definitely was, definitely like trying to wake them up, yes.
What was the dog's reaction?
I don't recall seeing the dog.
So, according to you, to the dog at least, if we can get in the mind of a dog, a relative stranger walks in the front door, climbs a set of stairs, the house is completely dark, walks into a bedroom door and starts barking. The person starts barking, get up, wake up, Brian, Nicole. And you don't remember seeing or hearing a dog at all.
Objection. Sustained.
All right, Rick, where is the evidence of the defense theory here?
So I think a couple things happened, Vinny. I think to some extent the defense was thrown a curveball by the prosecution not calling these witnesses, particularly Albert and Higgins, who I think came off the worst. And the defense doesn't want to call these people in as their witnesses, even though they'd get some latitude as hostile witnesses. And I think they learned along the way, or perhaps it was always the plan, but what they're able to do by trimming their sails is to plant the seeds. And that's what they want to do. And last time they tried to nurture and grow those seeds into full trees to present to the jury. And that's where I think they got hung up. Here, they're planting seeds, and those seeds are reasonable doubt. So they've got the flavor of it, that there's something untoward of a household of police officers not coming out when there's a body on their lawn, and particularly when it turns out to be a friend of theirs. There's these, they hear evidence that these are potentially dog bites. There's a dog in the house. That's enough for the defense to argue that point. And they've done that at each juncture of the case, whether it's with their expert testimony or the civilians. And again, I think they've learned a lesson and they are more focused on that reasonable doubt. You can't convict somebody with these question marks.
I got to write this down. I think I just got the name for my novel that I'm going to write. Seeds of Reasonable Doubt. Okay, let's take a listen to some more of those seeds that came in through former Trooper Proctor's friend who did not want to testify.
I'm sure the owner of the house will receive some.
And could you read Mr. Proctor's 2 responses?
Nope. Homeowner is a Boston cop too.
Mr. Proctor says, from all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job, and then uses the C word to describe. Oh, she's skating? 0 chance she's skated. She's effed. She's
Yes.
Is that what he said?
It is.
All right, Rebecca, those are some of the seeds of the protecting the police officer and going after this woman in a very biased way in the investigation.
Absolutely. And I think a mistake that the defense made in the previous trial was trying to gel this idea of true conspiracy, which would mean to a lot of people, a bunch of people getting together and making a decision to cover stuff up and actively participating in something like that. That is a high bar, I think, for 12 people to get over. What is a much lower bar is a cop who's not great at his job or has become sloppy at his job or has become a little bit incompetent or had some misconduct around his job, who maybe genuinely thought initially that Karen Reed did it and then just put his finger on the scales to make sure he closed the case. I think they did a really, really good job with that. And as far as what may or may not have happened in the house or the garage, it's much more likely, I think, and I was kind of hoping they'd do this in the first trial, just to kind of throw it out there that maybe something went wrong. Maybe there was something dumb, like a scuffle. And then it kind of cascaded from there, what this group of people decided to do or not do in order to throw the scent the other way. So I think that, you know, they've done a good job this time of leaving that trail without being too specific and without inviting the jury to have a conversation that's a difficult one to have, which is about some sort of vast conspiracy.
Yeah, the closest I've seen to that meeting of 12 people was an AI recreation on TikTok. But that wasn't real. Rick, I want you to take a look at this because the defense did point this out, and they did spend some time on this. The surveillance video at the end of the night at the waterfall where Higgins and Albert are on the left-hand side, and you can see John O'Keefe on the right-hand side kind of calling them over there. Big guys, burly. They're saying something, but we can't hear it. Is that a seed?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nothing more than a seed. And if you try to work it too much, you're not going to get a full plant out of it. And I think that's what they did in the first trial. You know, look at these guys. They're taking a fighting stance. That means they went back to the house, took a fighting stance, and murdered somebody and dragged them out to the lawn. Just leave it at, look, you got these cops that were in that house. They're drinking. They're feisty. Maybe, maybe not. But if you're at maybe and maybe not, that's a not guilty.
Yeah, I mean, last year was much more specific. I remember that, and I don't remember seeing it in this retrial. The video from the basement going out through the hutch in the backyard and walking all the way around. The bulkhead, almost like recreating what they believe and how John O'Keefe was brought out of the house. Wasn't there. All right, guests are staying. Still to come. Why is this a murder case?
Did kill and murder the said John O'Keefe and is guilty of murder in the second degree and not in the first degree in violation of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 265, Section 1.
Karen Reed is in the midst of the retrial of the century.
She is factually innocent. She's guilty.
There's something wrong in this county.
Come at me.
John O'Keefe was killed by that defendant, Karen Reed.
She's the victim of a corrupted investigation that was never about the truth.
Another big day here at the Dedham Courthouse.
Fight on. Nothing's breaking me, Matt.
You'll see it all unfold right here on Court TV.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Most people hear murder, they instantly think shooting somebody, stabbing somebody, praying, deliberate premeditation. Her Honor will start doing the law. I'm not going to trample that area, but I can tell you clearly, we are not going to try to prove that Karen Reed tried to kill John O'Keefe. We're not going to try to prove to you that she intended or wanted him dead. That's not second-degree murder. What we'll prove to you is she engaged in an intentional act, driving back at him at that speed, in the storm, in the darkness, knowing that he had just gotten out of her Lexus. She intended that act, which would cause a plain and strong likelihood of death.
Hank Brennan explaining to the jury during his opening statement what he's going to prove and why this is a murder case from his perspective. Take a listen to the clerk. This is at the beginning of the trial, James McDermott. This is part of what I love about covering cases in Massachusetts. There's a formality to the whole thing, and they started the case off like this. Take a listen.
Karen Reed of Mansfield in the county of Bristol, on or about January 29, 2022, at Canton in the county of Norfolk, did assault and beat John O'Keefe with intent to murder such person, and by such assault and battery did kill and murder the said John O'Keefe, and is guilty of murder in the second degree and not in the first degree in violation of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 265, Section 1. To these indictments, the defendant has pled that she is not guilty and for trial has put herself upon the country which country you are, and you were sworn to try the issue.
I love that part of the case up there. Okay, so we know that she was drinking. We've seen it on video. She's admitted it in some of those clips as well. So when this case first happened, she was arrested, and those were the charges: drinking, driving, causing the death of someone else. That's what it was. But then things changed, and the grand jury returned a murder indictment, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Why is this a murder case? Here to help us with our investigation, Rick Grundy, tried a lot of murder cases up there, and Rebecca Lavoie, journalist and host of Crime Writers On podcast. I want to put the law up here, the elements for second-degree murder in Massachusetts, and Rick, feel free to correct me if we've gotten anything wrong here. The defendant caused the death of the victim. You put the name in there. And then the defendant did one of three things, A, B, or C. I believe what Hank Brennan's talking about is C here. Intended to do an act which, in the circumstances known to the defendant, a reasonable person would have known created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result. Rick, why is this a second-degree murder case?
So I think just based on the facts, if that's what you're asking, it's because they came up with this, put the car in reverse. So you have a specific intent there to bring the car back. It wasn't just she was driving by him and hit him. Specific intent, and you revved it up to 25, 26 miles an hour, and you directed at him. So I think that's what made them decide to go from motor vehicle homicide to a second degree.
Rebecca,
and a second degree is...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I just, when I was a prosecutor, I always avoided it because it raises more questions than it can ever answer. I'd rather go with, well, in a case like this, I'm going to just stick with the motor vehicle homicide alcohol. But if it's a close call, I just put the first in there. It's far clearer instruction, easier for the jury to understand.
Rebecca, do you think it has anything to do with the victim being a police officer?
Actually, I don't. What I think it has to do with is a very common practice of upcharging, piling on charges in order to force a defendant to take a plea. I think that that's what they were attempting to do here by asking the grand jury to come back with that indictment for second-degree murder. You just had a segment on before us with John DePietro, one of the most hyperbolic anti-Karen Reed people I've ever heard about. And even he concedes that if Karen Reed hit John with her car, she probably didn't know she did it or didn't know it was hard. That's actually honestly what I thought when I started looking at this case 2 years ago, before I, saw the science and saw that it was impossible that the collision could have happened, essentially. But yeah, I believe this was an attempt to upcharge her. And I think there were some additional pressures on the Norfolk County DA's office. They became pot committed for other reasons to bring on this murder charge.
Rick, are you surprised that after the first trial, when the information came out and some of the jurors started speaking, and they said it was 12-0 not guilty on the murder, It was 12-0 not guilty on leaving the scene of the accident, counts 1 and 3, and they were debating count 2, which is the charge that you said you would have brought. Are you surprised that they didn't rethink it for the retrial, to reevaluate it, or have some curiosity about what that first jury thought and taking that into consideration?
Well, Vinny, you uniquely know that the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office and the Homicide Unit in particular used to be my baby, and I can't speak highly of it now, and it personally hurts me. So Rebecca makes an excellent point, and I've encountered that as a prosecutor from elected officials. So that's definitely a potential. I think with respect to the going into the second trial, there was just too much chest pumping at that point in time. Nobody was going to back down from anything. And in particular, when it ended up going to the SJC with respect to these verdicts, at that point in time, they fought that through. They weren't going to give anything up. And again, I think it was they put themselves on a fool's errand. And I think it still may very well trip up this jury.
Absolutely. And Rebecca, when I think about that, the first jury and what they did, from my interview with one of the jurors, it seemed like it was relatively quickly that they got rid of the murder and leaving the scene. And no one believed that there was any intent. And Hank Brennan sort of addressed that in his opening, saying that's not what we're arguing here. But when a jury hears the word murder, you know, we're human. Like we think there's a difference between a murder and getting drunk and hitting someone with your car. There's just a difference.
There's absolutely a difference.
Think,
you know, what were you saying? I think one of the things that Hank Brennan did here, which was smart, I mean, he has sort of interjected, appropriately or not, some sort of slippery alternative theories. Like just today in court, he talked about John O'Keefe's foot potentially, you know, twisting on a curb. Maybe he fell backwards accidentally. And I think what he's been trying to do is make it so that the jury will go into the deliberation room and say, okay, I know that the official theory is this, but what about this? What about this? What about this? And that, I think, is where the other charges could come into play. I just want to mention one other thing. 2 years ago, in April, the federal investigation really heated up, and we're not sure whether or not the investigation is into the Norfolk County DA's office or police misconduct or some combination thereof. In February, when Donald Trump took office, civil rights investigations and investigations into police were ordered to cease, and the investigation here closed. And I'm not saying that's why, but certainly the timing lines up. I think that with the federal investigation looming over this office,
that may have had some influence. Absolutely. We're out of time, Rebecca. I hate to do it, but we're out of time. Thank you so much, Rebecca Lavoie, Rick Grundy. Great to have you as we get ready to wrap this case up. Now, if you believe the members of the first jury who have come forward, this shouldn't be a murder case. That jury relatively quickly agreed Karen Read was not guilty of murder and were debating manslaughter when they became hopelessly deadlocked. But what the first jury did is irrelevant to this new jury who has actually seen a much different trial. The question is the evidence more compelling for the prosecution or defense? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.